I watched in complete disbelief as Margaret Whitfield, the self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Estates, frantically jabbed her so-called master key into my front door lock. Her face was red with rage, sweat beading on her forehead as the key refused to turn. The two contractors behind her shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing they had been dragged into something they never signed up for. "This is impossible," Margaret hissed, trying the key again and again. "I have the right to enter any home in this development." But what Margaret did not know was that her next move would be the biggest mistake of her life. As I stood there, arms crossed, watching her authority crumble in real time, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Her voice was venomous as she dialed those three numbers that would change everything. "I need police immediately," she barked into the phone. "There is a dangerous situation at 1247 Maple Grove Drive." What Margaret also did not know was that 16-year-old Jake, my son, was sitting in the emergency dispatch center that very moment, and he was about to receive the call that would expose her lies to the entire world. 6 months ago, I thought I had found paradise. After a bitter divorce that left me with 3 kids and a desperate need for a fresh start, Willowbrook Estates seemed like the answer to my prayers. The community was picture perfect, with manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and homes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. But paradise came with a price, and her name was Margaret Whitfield. Margaret was the HOA president, though she acted more like a dictator ruling over her personal kingdom. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a wardrobe that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager." From the moment I moved in, she made it clear that she would be watching my every move. The first note appeared on my door 3 days after I moved in. "Dear resident," it began in her sharp, precise handwriting, "your mailbox is currently 2 inches above the approved height standard. Please remedy this violation within 48 hours or face a $50 fine." 2 inches. I actually got out a ruler and measured. She was right, but barely. That was when I realized what kind of person I was dealing with. The second note came a week later. This time, it was about my garden gnome. Apparently, my cheerful little ceramic friend was aesthetically inappropriate for the neighborhood standards. I had bought him to make my youngest daughter smile after the trauma of the divorce, but according to Margaret, he was a threat to property values. I complied with both demands, hopping to keep the peace. But peace was not what Margaret wanted. She wanted submission, and she could smell my vulnerability like a predator. Meanwhile, my son Jake was thriving in his summer job. At 16, he had been accepted into a youth program that allowed him to work part-time as a 911 dispatcher. He was mature for his age, responsible, and took his job seriously. The irony of what was about to happen still gives me chills. Margaret's harassment escalated with each passing week. She would walk by my house with a clipboard, measuring my grass with an actual ruler. She took photographs of my car if I parked even slightly crooked. She sent certified letters about the placement of my trash cans, the color of my front door mat, and the height of my fence. But the worst part was her growing obsession with getting inside my home. She claimed she needed to conduct compliance inspections to verify that my interior modifications met HOA standards. Every time she brought it up, I politely declined. I had read the HOA bylaws cover to cover, and nowhere did it mention mandatory interior inspections. That should have been the end of it, but Margaret was not the type of woman who accepted no for an answer. One morning, she appeared at my door with contractors in tow, claiming she needed to verify my home modifications. When I refused entry, she smiled coldly and pulled something from her purse that made my blood run cold. "Perhaps you do not understand," she said, dangling a key in front of my face. "As HOA president, I have master key access to every home in this development. You can let me in willingly, or I can let myself in." I stared at that key, feeling a chill run down my spine. Something about this felt very, very wrong. That night I could not sleep. Margaret's threat echoed in my mind as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The idea that someone could have a key to my home, my sanctuary, my safe space with my children, was absolutely terrifying. The next morning, I did what any reasonable person would do. I started researching. I pulled out every document from my home purchase, every HOA agreement, every bylaw and regulation I had signed. I read through pages of legal jargon, searching for any mention of master keys or mandatory interior inspections. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. According to the HOA bylaws, the association had the right to inspect exterior modifications and common areas. They could fine residents for violations of aesthetic standards. They could even place liens on homes for unpaid fees. But nowhere, in any document, was there any provision for entering private homes without permission. I called the HOA management company. The representative was confused by my question. "Master keys," she repeated. "No, we do not provide master keys to board members. That would be a massive liability issue. HOA presidents have no authority to enter private residences." My stomach dropped. If the management company had not provided the key, where had Margaret gotten it? And more importantly, was it even real? I decided to do some detective work. I started calling other homeowners in the development, asking casual questions about HOA inspections. What I discovered made my blood boil. Margaret had been terrorizing the entire neighborhood with her fake authority. She had convinced elderly residents to let her into their homes by claiming it was required by law. She had threatened new homeowners with massive fines if they did not comply with her inspections. She had even convinced some people to pay for unnecessary repairs based on her made-up violations. But here was the kicker. When I asked if anyone had ever seen her actually use a master key, the answer was always no. She always demanded that homeowners open the door for her. She never actually used the key herself. That was when I realized the truth. Margaret's master key was probably fake. She was running a massive bluff, using fear and intimidation to make people comply with her illegal demands. I tried to contact other HOA board members, but Margaret had them all under her thumb. She had convinced them that she was protecting property values and maintaining community standards. They either supported her completely or were too intimidated to speak up. The more I learned, the angrier I became. Margaret was not just a pushy HOA president. She was a fraud, a bully, and possibly a criminal. She was violating people's privacy, stealing their money, and destroying their peace of mind. But I was not going to let her get away with it. I started documenting everything. Every interaction, every threat, every demand. I took photographs of her measuring my grass, recorded her phone calls, and kept copies of every ridiculous notice she left on my door. I also started talking to my neighbors, quietly building a network of people who were tired of Margaret's abuse. Not everyone was ready to stand up to her, but a few brave souls were willing to share their stories. The key became a symbol of everything wrong with Margaret's reign of terror. It represented her willingness to lie, cheat, and intimidate to get what she wanted. It was her trump card, her ultimate weapon against anyone who dared to challenge her authority. But every weapon has a weakness, and Margaret was about to learn that her key was as fake as her authority. The showdown was coming, and I was ready for it. Tuesday morning started like any other day. Jake had left early for his dispatcher shift, and my two younger children were at summer camp. I was enjoying a rare moment of peace with my coffee when I heard the familiar sound of Margaret's voice in my driveway. Through my window, I watched her march up my walkway with her usual entourage of intimidation, her clipboard, her measuring tape, and two contractors who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. But this time, there was something different about her demeanor. She looked determined, almost desperate. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive knocking. "Open up," Margaret called through the door. "This is an official HOA inspection. I have the legal authority to enter this premises." I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. Margaret stood there in her pressed blazer and perfectly applied makeup, but there was something wild in her eyes. "Good morning, Margaret," I said calmly. "What can I help you with?" "You can help by stepping aside," she snapped. "I am here to conduct a mandatory safety inspection of your home. I have received reports of unauthorized modifications that may violate building codes." The contractors behind her shifted uncomfortably. I could see in their faces that they were beginning to realize this was not a normal job. "Margaret," I said firmly, "I have researched the HOA bylaws extensively. There is no provision for mandatory interior inspections. You do not have the authority to enter my home without my permission." Her face turned red. "Do not lecture me about authority, young lady. I am the HOA president. I know what my rights are." "Then you should also know that I have the right to refuse entry to my private property." Margaret's hands were shaking with rage. She reached into her purse and pulled out that key, holding it up like a weapon. "You seem to be confused about how this works," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I do not need your permission. I have master key access to every home in this development. You can step aside willingly, or I can enter without your cooperation." The contractors looked at each other nervously. One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said to Margaret, "if the homeowner is refusing entry, maybe we should come back another time when she is more cooperative." "No," Margaret barked. "We are doing this inspection today, right now." She pushed past me toward my front door, key in hand. I watched in fascination as she inserted the key into my lock, her face confident and smug. She turned the key. Nothing happened. She tried again, twisting harder this time. The key would not turn. "What the hell?" she muttered, pulling the key out and examining it. She inserted it again, jiggling it frantically. Still nothing. The contractors were watching with growing confusion. Margaret's face was turning purple with embarrassment and rage. "This is impossible," she hissed. "This key works on every door in this development." "Does it?" I asked quietly. She tried the key again, using both hands this time, putting her full weight behind it. The key would not budge. It was clear to everyone watching that either the key was fake or my lock was different from the others. Margaret's perfect facade was cracking in real time. The contractors were exchanging glances, clearly realizing they had been brought into something they did not understand. Her authority, her power, her control over the situation was evaporating with each failed attempt to use her master key. "There must be something wrong with your lock," she said desperately. "You must have changed it illegally." "I have not changed anything," I replied. "This is the original lock that came with the house." Margaret's hands were shaking now. 6 months of building up to this moment, 6 months of threats and intimidation, and it was all falling apart because her key did not work. But Margaret was not the type of person to accept defeat gracefully. As I watched her realize that her bluff had been called, that her authority was a lie, that her power was an illusion, I saw something dangerous flicker in her eyes. "Fine," she said, pulling out her phone. "If you want to do this the hard way, we will do it the hard way." That was when she made the call that would destroy her life. Margaret's finger trembled as she dialed 911. The contractors had backed away, sensing that something was about to go very wrong. I stood in my doorway, watching this woman completely lose her mind in real time. 911, what is your emergency? Came the voice from her phone. I need police immediately, Margaret said, her voice shaking with rage. I am at 1247 Maple Grove Drive in Willowbrook Estates. There is a dangerous situation here. My jaw dropped. A dangerous situation. I was standing calmly in my own doorway while she had a public meltdown on my front porch. What kind of dangerous situation, ma'am? The dispatcher asked. The homeowner is threatening me and preventing me from conducting a lawful inspection. She is being hostile and aggressive. I fear for my safety. I could not believe what I was hearing. Margaret was literally making up a crime that had not happened, describing a situation that existed only in her twisted imagination. Ma'am, can you describe the threats that were made against you? Margaret paused, realizing she needed to provide specifics. She told me I could not enter her property. She is blocking me from performing my duties as HOA president. She is being verbally abusive and intimidating. None of that was true, not a single word of it. Are you injured, ma'am? Do you need medical assistance? No, but I need officers here immediately. This woman is clearly unstable and dangerous. She needs to be arrested for interfering with official HOA business. The dispatcher continued asking questions, and Margaret continued making up answers. She described me as hostile when I had been nothing but calm. She claimed I had threatened her when I had done nothing, but politely refused entry to my own home. She insisted she had legal authority to enter my property when she absolutely did not. But what Margaret did not know was that fate was about to deliver the most poetic justice imaginable. 20 miles away, at the emergency dispatch center, my 16-year-old son Jake was having the strangest morning of his life. He had been working his shift normally when a call came in that made his blood run cold. He recognized the address immediately, 1247 Maple Grove Drive. That was his home. Then he recognized the voice making the accusations. Margaret Whitfield, the woman who had been terrorizing his family for months. And finally, he heard something that made his heart stop. His mother's voice in the background, calm and reasonable, completely contradicting everything Margaret was claiming. Jake's training kicked in. He could not let his personal feelings interfere with his professional duties. He had to handle this call like any other emergency, even though someone was lying about his own mother to the police. "Ma'am," Jake said, his voice steady and professional, "can you tell me specifically what threats were made against you?" Margaret became frustrated. "I already told you, she is being hostile and threatening." "I need you to be more specific. What exactly did she say that made you fear for your safety?" Margaret stammered, realizing she could not provide specific threats because none had been made. She just has this attitude. She is clearly unstable." Jake continued his questions, each one designed to get Margaret to be more specific about her claims. But the more questions he asked, the more obvious it became that Margaret could not provide any concrete evidence of the emergency she was claiming. "Ma'am, are you currently in immediate physical danger?" "Well, no, but..." "Has the homeowner made any specific threats of violence against you?" "Not exactly, but..." Has she displayed any weapons or made any gestures that made you fear for your safety? No, but she is clearly disturbed. With each question, Margaret's story became more and more ridiculous. Jake was documenting every word, every contradiction, every admission that there was no actual emergency. Margaret had no idea that her attempt to weaponize the police against me was being handled by someone who knew the truth. She had no idea that every lie she told was being recorded and would later be used against her. She had no idea that her phone call was about to become the evidence that would destroy her completely. Jake stared at his computer screen, his fingers moving across the keyboard as he documented every word of Margaret's increasingly frantic call. Inside, his heart was racing, but years of training and natural maturity kept his voice calm and professional. "Ma'am, I need to dispatch officers to your location," Jake said. "But first, I need to complete our emergency assessment. You mentioned that you are conducting an official inspection. What agency are you with?" Margaret's voice brightened, thinking she was finally being taken seriously. "I am the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I have legal authority to inspect any property in the development." "And you have documentation of this authority with you?" "Of course I do. I have my master key right here." Jake made a note. Margaret had just admitted on a recorded line that she was claiming government authority based on a key. This was getting better by the minute. "Ma'am, when you say the homeowner is being threatening, can you describe her behavior right now?" "She is just standing there with her arms crossed, staring at me. It is very intimidating." Jake almost laughed. Margaret was calling the police because his mother was standing calmly in her own doorway. "Is she blocking your path, preventing you from leaving the property?" "Well, no, but she is refusing to let me enter her home." "And you believe you have the legal right to enter her home against her will?" "Absolutely. I am the HOA president." Jake was building a beautiful case against Margaret with her own words. Every answer she gave was digging her deeper into legal trouble. "Ma'am, I have officers en route to your location. While we are waiting for them to arrive, I need you to stay on the line. For everyone's safety, I need you to step back from the front door and wait for the officers to arrive." "But I need to complete my inspection," Margaret protested. "Ma'am, for everyone's safety, please step away from the front door and wait for the officers. Do not attempt to enter the residence until they arrive." Jake could hear Margaret huffing and puffing, but she complied. He could also hear his mother's voice in the background, calm and reasonable, asking Margaret if she was feeling all right. "The homeowner is asking if you need medical attention," Jake said. "That does not sound like threatening behavior to me." Margaret's voice turned sharp. "She is being sarcastic. She is mocking me." "Ma'am, offering medical assistance is considered mocking. You do not understand the situation here. This woman has been defying my authority for months. She thinks she can just ignore HOA regulations and do whatever she wants. And you believe the appropriate response is to enter her home against her will." "I have the legal right." "Ma'am, I need to advise you that making false claims about legal authority is a serious matter. Are you certain you have the legal right to enter someone's home without their permission?" Margaret's voice wavered. I am the HOA president. I have a master key." "A master key does not grant legal authority to enter someone's home without permission, ma'am. That would be considered unlawful entry." For the first time, Margaret went quiet. Jake could practically hear her brain processing what he had just said. "Are you saying I do not have the right to inspect properties in my development?" "Ma'am, I am saying that homeowners have the right to refuse entry to their private property. If you have concerns about HOA violations, those would need to be addressed through proper legal channels. Margaret's voice was getting smaller, but I am the president. Ma'am, being president of a homeowners association does not grant you law enforcement powers. You cannot force entry into someone's home. Jake could hear the contractors in the background, and he could tell they were getting nervous. They were probably realizing they had been brought to witness something illegal. Officers should be arriving momentarily, Jake said. Please remain calm and cooperate with them when they arrive. But what about my inspection? Ma'am, that will be up to the officers to determine. But I want to be very clear. You do not have the legal authority to enter someone's home without their permission, regardless of your position with the HOA. Margaret's world was collapsing around her, and she was starting to realize it. The officers were coming, but they were not coming to arrest his mother. They were coming to investigate Margaret's false emergency call and her claims of authority she did not possess. Jake had turned Margaret's own weapon against her, using proper protocol and professional questioning to expose her lies completely. 2 police cruisers pulled up to my house, their lights flashing but no sirens. I watched from my doorway as 2 officers stepped out, their faces showing the practiced calm of professionals who had seen every kind of human drama imaginable. Margaret immediately rushed toward them, her voice high and frantic. Officers, thank goodness you are here. This woman is completely out of control. She is preventing me from conducting a lawful inspection of her property. Officer Martinez, a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes, held up his hand. Ma'am, please slow down. Let us assess the situation first. His partner, Officer Chen, was already looking around the scene. She noticed the contractors standing awkwardly by their truck, clearly wanting to leave. She noticed me standing calmly in my doorway, not looking threatening at all. And she noticed Margaret, who was practically vibrating with nervous energy. What seems to be the problem here? Officer Martinez asked. Margaret launched into her story, but now it sounded even more ridiculous when spoken to actual law enforcement. I am the president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. I have the legal authority to inspect any property in this development. This woman is refusing to allow me to perform my duties, and she has been verbally abusive and threatening. Officer Chen looked at me. Ma'am, have you made any threats against this woman? No, officer, I said calmly. I have simply refused to allow her to enter my home. I do not believe she has the legal authority to force entry into my property. She does not understand, Margaret interrupted. As HOA president, I have master key access to all properties. I can enter any home for safety inspections. Both officers looked at each other. Officer Martinez spoke first. Ma'am, can you show me the documentation that gives you the authority to enter private homes without permission? Margaret fumbled with her purse. I have my master key right here. A key is not legal documentation, Officer Chen said. Do you have any written authority from the city, county, or state that allows you to enter private residences against the owner's will? Margaret's face was turning red again. I am the HOA president. The residents agreed to this when they moved here. Ma'am, can you show us the specific language in the HOA agreement that grants you the right to enter homes without permission? Margaret could not answer because no such language existed. The officers were asking for exactly what I had spent weeks looking for and never found. Officer Martinez turned to me. Ma'am, have you reviewed your HOA agreement regarding property inspections? Yes, officer. The agreement allows for exterior inspections and common area maintenance, but there is no provision for entering private homes without permission. And you have refused to allow this woman to enter your home. Yes, officer, that is my right as a homeowner. Officer Chen was taking notes. Ma'am, she said to Margaret, you called 911 claiming there was a dangerous situation. Can you point to any specific threatening behavior? Margaret gestured wildly at me. Look at her. She is just standing there staring at me. It is very intimidating. Standing in her own doorway is intimidating. She has this attitude. What attitude specifically? Margaret could not answer. She could not point to a single threatening action, a single harsh word, or a single moment of actual danger. Officer Martinez was examining Margaret's key. Ma'am, where did you get this key? It was provided to me as HOA president for emergency access. Who provided it? Margaret hesitated. I obtained it through proper channels. What channels specifically? Well. The officers were realizing what I had suspected all along. Margaret's key was either fake or had been obtained through improper means. Officer Chen spoke up. Ma'am, I need to inform you that filing a false police report is a criminal offense. Based on what we are observing here, there does not appear to be any emergency or dangerous situation. Margaret's eyes went wide. False report, but she is preventing me from doing my job. Ma'am, if you have a civil dispute with the homeowner regarding HOA matters, that needs to be resolved through proper legal channels. You cannot use emergency services to force entry into someone's home. But I have the right. Ma'am, you do not have the right to enter someone's home without their permission. That would be considered unlawful entry, which is also a criminal offense. The contractors had heard enough. They approached Officer Martinez. Officer, one of them said, we were hired to do some work after an inspection, but we had no idea this was not legitimate. We are leaving now. As the contractors packed up their equipment and drove away, Margaret's last bit of credibility disappeared with them. Officer Chen was filling out her report. Ma'am, we are going to need to document this incident. You called 911 claiming an emergency that does not exist, and you attempted to force entry into someone's home without legal authority. Margaret's perfect world was crumbling around her, and she was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistakes. The aftermath of Margaret's failed invasion was swift and decisive. Officer Chen completed her report, while Officer Martinez explained to Margaret exactly what laws she had broken and what consequences she might face. Ma'am, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor offense, Officer Martinez said. You called 911 claiming an emergency that did not exist. That is a crime. Margaret's face had gone pale, but I thought there was a dangerous situation. Ma'am, you described specific threats that were never made. You claimed the homeowner was being hostile and aggressive when she was clearly calm and cooperative. You fabricated an emergency to use law enforcement as a tool in a civil dispute. Officer Chen looked up from her paperwork. Additionally, your claim that you have legal authority to enter private homes without permission is false. Attempting to use that false authority could constitute fraud or attempted unlawful entry. But I am the HOA president, Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible. Being HOA president does not make you a government official, Officer Martinez explained. You have no law enforcement powers. You cannot force entry into people's homes. You cannot use emergency services to resolve civil disputes. As the officers prepared to leave, Officer Chen handed Margaret a citation. "You will need to appear in court to address the false report charge. I strongly suggest you consult with an attorney." Margaret stared at the citation like it was written in a foreign language. Her world of absolute authority had completely collapsed in the span of an hour. But the real justice was just beginning. Word spread quickly through Willowbrook Estates about Margaret's spectacular failure. The story of her fake master key and her false police report became neighborhood legend within days. Other homeowners who had been intimidated by her threats began coming forward with their own stories. The HOA board called an emergency meeting when they learned about Margaret's actions. They were horrified to discover that she had been operating completely outside her authority, making illegal threats, and potentially exposing the association to massive liability. Mrs. Peterson, an elderly board member who had been afraid to challenge Margaret, finally found her voice. "Margaret, you told us you were protecting property values. You never mentioned master keys or forced entries. We never authorized any of this." Margaret tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recording of her 911 call had been provided to the board, along with Officer Chen's report documenting her false claims and illegal actions. The board vote was unanimous. Margaret was immediately removed from her position as HOA president and banned from holding any leadership role in the association. But Margaret's problems were far from over. The district attorney's office decided to prosecute her for filing a false police report. She was also facing potential civil lawsuits from homeowners who had been intimidated by her illegal tactics. Meanwhile, Jake received a commendation from his supervisor for his professional handling of a personally difficult situation. His ability to remain calm and follow proper protocol while someone was making false accusations about his own mother impressed everyone at the dispatch center. "You did exactly what you were trained to do," his supervisor told him. "You gathered facts, documented everything, and let the officers make their own assessment. That is exactly how these situations should be handled." Jake never told Margaret that he was the dispatcher who had taken her call. He never gloated or sought revenge. He simply did his job with integrity and let the truth speak for itself. As for me, I chose to pursue legal action against Margaret for harassment and attempted illegal entry. My attorney explained that Margaret's pattern of intimidation and her attempt to force entry into my home constituted actionable harassment. The lawsuit was settled out of court, with Margaret agreeing to cease all contact with me and my family, pay for my legal fees, and make a substantial donation to a local charity that helps victims of harassment. The new HOA president was Mrs. Kim, a retired teacher who believed in cooperation rather than intimidation. Under her leadership, the association actually began serving the homeowners instead of terrorizing them. Margaret and her husband quietly moved away from Willowbrook Estates 6 months later. I heard she tried to run for HOA president in her new community, but was rejected when her background check revealed her criminal conviction for filing false police reports. The master key, as it turned out, was completely fake. Margaret had ordered it online from a novelty key company. It was never intended to open any real locks. It was just a prop in her elaborate performance of authority. Willowbrook Estates became a peaceful community again. Children played in their yards without fear of being measured and cited. Adults could park their cars without worrying about being photographed and fined. The neighborhood returned to what it was supposed to be, a place where families could live in peace. And sometimes, late at night, When I look out my window at the quiet streets and happy homes, I remember that moment when Margaret's key failed to turn in my lock. That was the moment when truth triumphed over deception, when justice prevailed over abuse, and when a fake master key became the instrument of real accountability.